Good morning, students. In the last class, we have completed the selfish chain part 1. Today, we are moving to be reading the selfish chain part 2. And I think you have remembered the story of selfish chain part 1. What is the story about? Yes, once there was a giant. He was very selfish. He had a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. There were beautiful flowers over the grass like stars. There were peach trees with delicate blossoms of pink and pearl in springtime. They bore rich fruit in the autumn. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. The children used to go to the giant's garden and played every afternoon. One day, the giant came back from his visit to his friend, the Cornish ogre. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. He became angry and shouted at them. He built a high wall around the garden. He put up a notice board: trespassers will be prosecuted. He did not allow anybody to play in the garden. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but it was very dusty and full of hard stones. So they used to wander round the high wall and talk about the beautiful garden. The spring came all over the country. There were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The birds did not come to sing in it as there were no children. There was snow, frost, north winds, and hails in the garden of the selfish giant. He sat at the window and looked out sadly at his cold white garden. He hoped that there would be change in the weather. So, this is the story of the selfish giant part 1, isn't it? So, today we will be seeing the part 2. The Selfish Giant, Part 2. Old Giant. One morning I was lying awake in bed when I heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet that I thought it must be the king's musician passing by. But it was really only a little linnet bird singing outside my window. So, one morning, when old Giant was lying awake in his bed, he heard some lovely music, and he means that sound was so sweet that he thought someone, a king's musician, might be passing by. Means some of the king's musician may be playing that music, and maybe they are going nearby. But it was not. But it was really not. Really only a little linnet bird. Linnet bird means a small brown and grey bird. So actually, when he saw, it was a small linnet bird singing outside his window. It was so long since I had heard a bird sing in my garden that it seemed to me to be the most beautiful music in the world. So there is not a single bird in his garden was singing for so many months, isn't it? So when he heard a bird singing in his garden, it seemed to be the most beautiful music in the world, because for so many months there is means he didn't listen a single bird singing in his garden. So it was like he was feeling as if it is the most beautiful music in the world. Then the giant: the hail has stopped dancing over my head, and the north wind has ceased his roaring. A delicious smell is coming from the window. I believe the spring has come at last. The giant jumps out of bed and looks out. through a little hole in the wall. The children have crept in and are sitting in the branches of the trees. So, when after listening the sound, he has understood that the hail means small balls of ice that fall like rain. So he understood that hail has stopped dancing over his garden. Over my head means it was fully his garden was fully covered with snow, frost, isn't it? So he understood that hail has stopped, and also the north winds has ceased means stop happening. So he understood that hail has stopped, north winds has stopped, and he can smell a delicious smell, means he can smell a delicious smell coming from the window. And he, by that smell, he understood that he believes that the spring has come to his garden. By thinking like that, he jumps out of his bed and he looks out. When he look out through a little hole in the wall, he can see that the children have crept. The children have crept crept in and are sitting in the branches of the tree. So when he saw through a little hole, he can see that the children have crept in and are sitting in the branches of the trees. Then the old giant. In every tree I could see a little child. The trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene. Only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all round it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still quite covered with the frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. Climb up, little boy, said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the little boy was too tiny. It was then that my heart melted. So, when he saw children are sitting in the branches of the trees, so what he did, he saw that in every tree he can see a little child sitting there, and the trees were so glad to have the children back, because few months means so many months he didn't allow children, isn't it? So the trees were so glad to see the children back again, and they have covered and the trees have covered themselves with blossoms, and they were waving their arms, means they were waving their branches, whose branches, trees branches, gently above the children's heads, and the birds are flying about and twittering means uh, making a series of short high sounds. So even the birds were flying about and making a delightful sound, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. So to see that scene, it was so lovely. But in one corner it was still winter, and it was the farthest corner of the garden, so it is one of the distant corner. So there it is still winter only to that tree, and he can see a little boy standing near that tree, and he was so small that he could not reach up to the tree, means he was so small that he can't reach the branches of the tree. So he was wandering all around, means he was moving around that tree, and he was crying bitterly because he was unable to climb that tree, and the poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow. So that one tree was still covered with frost and snow, and also with the north wind uh, was blowing and roaring above that tree. And the tree is telling that, climb up little boy, climb up. But and it tried to bend its branches down as low as it could, means it was trying to help that boy. But the little boy was too tiny, means that boy was so small that he could not climb its branches. So it was then my heart melted by seeing that situation. The Jane's heart get melted. Can see here in the image also, the giant was helping that boy to sit on the branch. The giant, how selfish I have been. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. By seeing that situation, uh, he was thinking, means he was telling to himself that how selfish I have been. And he is telling that I have understood the reason that why spring was not coming to my garden. Then he has decided to put that little boy to sit on that, to sit on the top of the tree. He had decided to help that boy. And he and also he had decided to knock down, means he had decided to remove that wall round the garden. And he had decided to allow the children to play in his garden, saying that my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. So he has understood that how selfish he was, and he has decided to help that boy, and also to remove the huge wall which was built around the garden. And he has decided to allow the children to play in his garden. So, see the old giant what he was saying. I was really very sorry for what I had done. So I crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw me, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see me coming. So I stole up behind him and took him gently in my hand, and I put him into the tree. And I put him up into the tree, and the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it. And the little boy stretched out his two arms and flung them round my neck and kissed me. When the other children saw that, they came running back, and with them came the spring. So the old giant is telling that he was really very sorry for what he has done, means he was feeling sorry for what he has done. And he went downstairs and he opened the front door quite softly and went into the garden. But when the children saw the giant, they were means the children were so frightened, and they ran away, and the garden again became, means the garden again became winter. Only the little boy did not run, because his eyes were filled with full of tears that he did not see the giant. So what did he do? The giant stole up behind him, means this giant was standing behind that boy, and he took him gently in his hand, and he helped that boy to sit on that top of the tree. And the tree immediately broke into blossom, and the birds came and was singing on that tree. And the little boy, what did he do? He stretched out his two arms and he flung them round his neck, and he kissed the giant. When the other children saw that, they all came running to that garden again. Along with them, the spring also has come to the garden. So this is the story. I think you have understood till here. We'll be completing the remaining part in the next session. Before that, you have some hard words here. Musicians, linnet bird, delicious, seized, twittering, farthest, wandering, downstairs, frightened, stretched, flunk. And meanings: linnet bird, a small brown and grey bird. Hail, small balls of ice that fall like rain. Cease, stop happening. Twittering, making a series of short high sounds. And your home assignment is write hard words and meanings in your notebooks. Students, I have given you hard words and meanings separately. I want you to write them neatly in your notebooks without any spelling mistakes, and also learn the spellings of the hard words and also learn the meanings. We'll be completing the remaining part of the lesson in the next session. Thank you. Have a good day.